think as a society at large, we often forget that money is actually only like valuable when it's traded for a good or service. It's not worth anything until it's cashed in for what you want to get in exchange.
But before we get into that, I thought maybe just to set the table here, I would read a little bit of the Amazon description, just going to paint the picture a little bit. So this book was Die with Zero, Getting All You Can from Your Money and Your Life by Bill Perkins. He actually referred to Your Money or Your Life book several times. And it says here, a common sense guide to living rich instead of dying rich. Imagine if by the time you died, you did everything you were told to. You worked hard, saved money, and looked forward to financial freedom when you retired. The only thing you wasted along the way was your life. Die with Zero presents a startling new and provocative philosophy as well as a practical guide on how to get the most out of your money and out of your life. It's intended for those who place lifelong memorable experiences far ahead of simply making and accumulating money for one's golden years. And I think we are the audience that he probably doesn't have to sell hard to, because I think all appreciate experiencing life and finding that balance and prioritizing that. But this was your recommendation, Kate. So I thought maybe I would toss it off to you and get your impressions of the book and what you thought of it, and did it meet your expectations?
So I read it ages ago, but just the concept of it I find so refreshing, because as obviously I know that us as individuals are people that prioritize experiences and our lives and whatever, but I think the financial industry, and especially a lot of the personal finance space, people are so hyper-focused on budgeting and getting expenses as low as possible, maximizing their savings and investing rates as much as they can to just put as much money away as possible without often stopping to ask themselves, like, to what end? What is the point of this? What is the goal? If there's a genuine, true desire of early retirement, amazing. If there's a genuine, like, true desire of building, like, intergenerational, like, legacy wealth, fine. But for most people, it's just this elusive idea of, okay, if they say the safe withdrawal rate is 4%, that means I need $5 million to retire or whatever. And it's why? Because then you're probably dying with more than $5 million because it'll probably grow. And what's the reason? What's the point of that when so often people just neglect either enjoyment of experiences or enjoyment of purchases throughout their lives, just to have more and more money when you're older and life's not guaranteed and fun at 80 is not guaranteed. We don't know, even if we're healthy, we don't know what our lives and our networks and whatever will be like.
I'm just telling you, pressing 50 is your health and fun at 50 there. I feel like once I get on the floor with my son, dude, it's like a crapshoot if I'm getting back up. I want to, when you're talking, Kate, I'm thinking about, I feel a little bit like the Instagram lifestyle that people talk about is about like those experiences, and yet how phony and like how contrived sometimes and unsustainable it is in other ways. I kind of wonder, is there almost like a swing to the extreme on the other end of showing, oh my gosh, I'm young, I'm hip, I'm living the life, I'm in St. Bart's, I'm off to the airport again, or whatever it is. How does that jive with people that are, I think almost, it's a generation ago where I think about my uncle and my parents who would be like, oh, I don't have the money. And it was actually, yes, I do have the money for that, but I choose to sacrifice my own happiness and comfort for not spending the money. And I think about one time they were flying somewhere and I upgraded them to Economy Plus or something like that. And then when they got to the airport, they undid it. And my mother was like, oh, Peter, we don't need that. Economy is fine for us. Even if it's, and anyway, long story short, is once you pay for something with the airline, they do not refund you for that. So I was like, oh, great, Mom. But if it's fake, if you're trying to enjoy life or you're saying you're enjoying life and it's fake, how worthless is that? Or is it? Or is it almost better to fake you're enjoying it and maybe try to and have some experiences? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think one thing I've been thinking about as you guys were talking is just how what ultimately is most important, I think, is, are you making the best use of what you have? Are you because like you were saying, as people, now that I'm in this new job, a lot of people, like everyone I know, every single person that has kids is going to Disney. It's like the thing, everyone does it. It's like, you got to check that off your list to be part of the group here. And I have 4 daughters. Sure, Disney would be really great. But I also hear about it from people afterwards, and it's chaotic. And I haven't always gotten the sense that it was done the way that we're talking about, in the sense of it being like really truly meaningful. I've heard it maybe more tiring. Trips with kids can be really tiring. So there's that just reality, but like it maybe like they may have been able to spend that in a different way. They may have been able to take a trip that was even, or done something totally different that was more meaningful and a better use of those funds, which I feel like is the consistent theme throughout that he's talking about, is just don't wait. There's that part of it. Don't wait until you like some sort of weird future you can't predict, but also make the best use of it. Because I think the devil's advocate on all this could be, don't blow all your money. You don't know what your future is going to be like. You might need that money for your health or for your life, or you could lose your job when you're 58 and have to figure out a few more years before you can do Social Security or whatever. And there's lots of unknowns that you're preparing for by storing up a nest egg. But the call to enjoy some things now. And I think I find so many people just trying to check boxes. Okay, we got to do the spring break trip. We got to do this trip. We got to do that trip. And I think you could get so much more value out of your spend. It took a moment or took a lot of time to truly think about what would be the best place to go. Like, what's the most meaningful thing? And like, just get a hotel room down the street that has a pool, and those kids would have the best time ever. You know what I mean? So here we are trying to overthink. We have to go to this beach house in Florida or whatever, which will be fun, but we don't have to do that. We could spend it a different way. And so that's what I think can be personalized for everyone. And sometimes it costs a lot of money, and sometimes it doesn't cost a lot of money, but making the best use of the time that you have too when you're healthy, I think is a great point in the theme of the book. And so I do really appreciate that call, because if you're a super saver, that you almost need permission sometimes to be able to spend money.
I will tell you, when we came back from spring break, we took a dolphin tour. We did a bunch of the tourist stuff. And then my parents asked Theo, what was your favorite part of the trip? And Theo said the tram ride, which was the free like golf cart shuttle from the end of the pier to the restaurant we ate at lunch one time. And just like I said, you never know what's going to be memorable. And certainly there is zero correlation between dollars spent and enjoyment for some people maybe that don't understand that yet. But I'm curious, because in some ways, Kate, you're living a rethinking lifestyle. Like you were talking about, Bjorn, how many times are there things that are so programmed, which just kills me. Oh, engagement ring should be 3 times your monthly salary or something like that. Or Sweetest Day, you're supposed to do this. Or Disney, you're supposed to go here, or to really have this experience, or retire at 60. There's just a million things that you could say that are so ingrained and from generation to generation are passed on, but are like, what are they based on? And I would say, Kate, for you to move abroad, right, or something like that is not necessarily part of, I don't think anyone's like normal plan, right? It's an outlier. And yet there's a ton of, I think everyone here would agree, there's a ton of interesting benefits of it. One, the earned income tax exclusion and like the geo arbitraging opportunity, depending on where you live, and seeing different cultures and having a life experience before you have roots or a job or something like. So like, how does that go into it? Because I think you have not just like those social forces on you, but in some cases, sometimes there are parents who are like, why are you doing this? Or are you saving enough? Or get a real job, or whatever it might be. Like, how do you find your own way in living and collecting those? And Bjorn, when he talks about I can't remember if it's life force, trading your life energy or whatever, it's the term from the book, Your Money or Your Life, but just kind of how many life units you're trading. And I feel like, Kate, you are cashing in, you are maximizing some life units right now. And how did you practically figure out how to do that, as opposed to just following the traditional, especially corporate path?
For better or for worse, it's just always been my nature. I started with taking a gap year at 18 between high school and college, and being around the world for that. And then right after college, I lived in India and Singapore for, 5, 6, 7 years. And so it's just, I think that my loved ones gave up years ago on predicting my actions or having opinions or whatever. But I think it's also in order to do something like this in a responsible and fulfilling way, it's also, I think, important to have done the work to lay the foundation, right? I can do this. I can work part-time while I'm living in India because I already had emergency savings built up, right? My only debt's my car. I already have retirement investments and such. And so I can afford to take a year or 2 off contributing to them. I can't afford to never contribute to them again, but I can afford to not contribute for this year and or for 3 or whatever. But so I think it's important to, same as like with your physical health, have your financial health kind of in check on like a routine basis, so that then little deviations don't hurt you. I could go on a vacation or buy a bag or come here for the year or whatever, and it's not going to really affect my life trajectory. And I think of a concept that I know was in this book, but is also so many other places, is like the idea of, is the money more valuable to you now, or is it more valuable to you in the future? And I think that obviously we remember, but I think as a society at large, we often forget that money is actually only like valuable when it's traded for a good or service. It's not worth anything until it's cashed in for what you want to get in exchange. So I think for me, this is just such a great example of, okay, maybe the $50,000 or whatever that I'm earning less this year, that's worth more to me now, like doing this for a year, giving myself this chance, this opportunity, all of that, than it would be with like part of that invested and saved and whatever.
Yeah, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit of the book that you inspired me with, is that he talks about going to Europe at the age of 20 versus the age of 50. And he's like, if you took $2,000 and went to Europe when you're 20, you backpack around Europe, you stay in hostels for $7 a night, you stay up all night drinking with other 20-year-olds, learning about the culture, seeing everything. He's like, you're going to have so many more memories and so many more experiences than if you go to Europe when you're 50 and spend $20,000, because you're just not going to, let's just be real, 20 to 50, you just have less energy. You have less energy to explore. You have less energy to stay up at night, to recover from drinking. You're not going to spend a night. You will not tolerate a $7 a night hostel. You will not tolerate like eating from a food truck for every meal. Your body just can't do it, and all these other things. And so like the difference between $2,000 now and a memory of, or a chock full of memories, versus $20,000 later, and maybe 10% of those memories, because you just can't experience as much, I think was a really good example. Almost and depressing in some ways. He talks about, and I don't remember if you remember this from when you read it, but when he just starts going through the age of things. And I think it's like when you talk to your parents about, here's our will, and if we die, here's like our safe and all this other stuff. And it's like, you don't want to think about those things, but I think he does it in a tasteful way. But he paints the reality of, there are guys that go when they're young and they ski 10 runs or 15 runs at Vail. And then there are guys that go back when they're 60 and they ski 10 or 15 runs. And you're using it in their mind as, I can ski as many runs as I did when they were young. But when they were young, then they went off and did some après ski and hung out and partied all night, and then did 15 runs the next day. Whereas when they're 60, they went to bed at 5 o'clock and then they did nothing else the rest of the vacation, because we don't want to admit that age, regardless, is a great equalizer affecting all of us, and how that diminishes so quickly with time, especially when you get to the later years, and how much more money you have to pile on to have those life experiences in any similar way than when you were young. And so there's this kind of, I'm a car guy, and so there's this kind of saying that it's like all the cool cars are too expensive to afford when you're young enough to enjoy them. And it's, he keeps talking about it, and he keeps talking about, yes, this book is towards the minority people who have money and are not necessarily trading off that. But I think about the people that are like the struggling, a lot of people that we work with sometimes, it's not an issue, right? It's not an issue of, just take a couple $1,000s and go to Europe. They don't have a choice, right? But there probably are a lot of people that still hoard, maybe not as many numerically or percentage-wise of society as there are of the other stuff. But I guess the one question I was going to ask is, doesn't matter. Let's say you lived your whole life on $30,000. You've earned $100,000. You've socked away a ton of money, but that's all you really needed to be happy or fulfilled. What should you do? Should you just spend money to have more experiences if you're already fulfilled? Or should you give it away? Or like, what's the solution? I know some people who have money who are just very simple people that might not even take flights like my parents. God knows economy class is good enough for them. That would drive as opposed to fly, even though they could probably own their own jet. You know what I'm saying? So how do you rationalize these ideas of spending more, having a better experience if they're already happy with life?
I think I can speak a little bit about that. I feel like we're close to that camp, maybe a little bit. Like we spend a lot less than we make. There's a couple of directions. Because I think I could retire earlier if I want to do. So it gives me options, which I do think could then trade for a lot more time. Like I could get way more time way earlier than the average person, but I don't think that's exactly what he's getting at, because I think that still probably means like in my 50s, even though that's earlier than other people. But that would still mean like the kids are out of the home, which may not be the best investment. So then I think, okay, there probably needs to be at some level permission given to super savers, which my advisor actually has helped a lot with that. Is he's reminded me exactly this: you have saved a lot, you are saving a lot, and that's great, but don't sacrifice all that for now. Enjoy your life now. Enjoy time with your kids. Do some special trips. Do some special things. So I've kind of needed permission, to be honest, to have the freedom to go and just do that, because it feels wrong at times, like whatever. So that is just an adjustment, but I appreciate that. And then the third part of it, I think, is I just looking at money as like, I like looking at my finances like I'm an investment manager, and I'm just trying to invest it in the best possible things. And kind of interesting timing with the market just going crazy this week, but I want to invest in the things that have the highest ROI. We've talked about this a lot. Just looking for the things that have the highest value, right sizing my budget and my spending so that more money is going toward the things that make more of a difference. And that's totally different for every person. And so it's not as easy to just say, have more experiences now, because like the experiences that our family loves to do may not even cost any money. Like we could just go bike riding more often, or we could just take a family walk around the neighborhood and play at a playground more often. And so it really is the time component that you're trying to get after or get toward. And I think that's the challenging one, because our world is not really set up well for that. Society in America, at least, is not set up with that mindset of more time is better, actually, than more money. It's always like more money. And if you're not trying to make more money, then like you're not fitting into the norm. I think you can use it to your advantage if you spend less than you make, because you can speed up when you get more time, potentially. Or you could use that as an even bigger option in the present to say, do I need to make as much? Could I have a different kind of job that isn't as demanding? And could I choose to get more time back? Kind of like what you were saying, Kate, of just like being okay with that and choosing, because we know that's like the great equalizer in the present is the time factor for everybody. So ultimately, I think the core of it is like investing and spending money on the things that mean the most to those like around you, those that are involved in your life. And that's where you can't go wrong in my mind in how you're using it. The time part, I think, is a little bit harder to make a reality, because sometimes your job changes, you get a promotion, which is great when you say yes, but then with that comes a bunch of other things that you're not used to, and you can prepare for all of it, and you can make a decision. Or maybe you have a job change and now you're looking for work, but then you're like, yeah, you were saying, I'm interested, but it needs to fit into other things I'm doing in my life too. You can create flexibility or lean into flexibility when it is created and decide to be okay with that. But it is hard to fight against the world that we're in and the realities that come with that, and just the unknowns of the future, because it's very hard to predict what's going to happen financially. Like nobody predicted the market was going to be down. I didn't look today, but it's probably down another 3 to 5%, I'm guessing, today. So that's 10% in 2 days. So it is all on paper. But if you're like in retirement, like some of our family members are, I'm sure, that's like a pretty big deal because you're relying on that.
Let's stay on the topic of family.
I was just going to add in, I think that the time in the present is such a hard thing to juggle, because if many of us are at that kind of in between where maybe we have enough money to have options theoretically, but not enough money to just stop working today completely. And so then it's like, and our society is not really set up with a structure of being able to just go to your boss and say, hey, can I switch my job down to 20 hours a week instead of 40, which might be what people could reasonably like afford and be interested in and would be a good like value for them. But that's just, as you said, Bjorn, it doesn't really fit in with our like American work culture. I did read an article in the New York Times years ago, which I thought was clever. It was pre-COVID, so I'm sure this isn't as mind-blowing now. But this couple was talking about they had just had a baby, and they each went to their job and asked, can I take a 10% pay cut so I can have every other Friday off? And both of their companies agreed to it. So they each kept 90% salary, but then worked 9 out of 10 work days. And it was great because they decided those are the days that'll be used for all like household errands, groceries. We'll just trade off each of that. And then the weekend can be like fully family fun time. And at the time I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, that's creative and clever.
And I'd take that deal in a heartbeat. And to come back to what you're talking about in careers and like less money, Kate, I want to ask you a little bit more about that. But to back up to Bjorn, before I forget on the kid stuff, I'm curious, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kate, but I'm going to try to paraphrase the example he gives with kids, because I think there's this like head and heart discussion, right, with kids and money and all these other things, because certainly dying with zero on your terms is one thing, but then secondly, when you have kids, there's this kind of like obligation. But he talks about many families, they have kids, and when the kids get older and they go out on their own, the typical value they will have in their life is probably between 20 and 35. It's they haven't really fulfilled their career yet, they're not making as much money, they start having kids, they start having more financial pressures, they start to cut back, and where money would really help them is between probably 25 and 35, right? Because they're struggling, maybe racking up some debt. And so what he says is you should will your children their inheritance at 25, because if you wait till they're 65 and you're 95, you die and they get 600 grand, guess what? That does not change their lifestyle. They're not going to buy anything more. They're not going to do anything more. They're going to add it to their assets. They're going to let it grow. But the value of it to giving to your kids when they actually need it is now they don't have the stress of taking the kids to Disney World or putting new clothes or all that stuff. So I can't remember what he said, but so when my kids became 25, I gave them each $5 million. I pre-inherited them or whatever. And then I gave my grandmother $5 million, my parents $10 million, or whatever it was. So and I would encourage people to or early will your inheritances. I'm curious.
I totally agree with that. And obviously you can't do like the full amount, whatever. You don't know how much you're actually going to, but I work with a couple people where the families are, one of the spouses or whatever, one of the families is quite wealthy and the adult child is planning to inherit millions of dollars or whatever. But like right now they're struggling paying the daycare bill. They're struggling paying for the nanny. They're struggling to save for college. And it's $3,000 a month would right now for these 5 years help them a heck of a lot more than $3 million, $5 million, whatever it is in 30 years, because you can't count on that. So you still have to save for your own retirement in the meantime. And yeah, to your point, Peter, it's like those are the years where expenses are really high, as many people are having kids or going to grad school, whatever. And income is just not there yet to cover those heightened expenses.
I've thought about this exact, I forgot that he said that in this, because I've thought about this exact concept. It's like the way that it works is backwards for what the actual financial needs are, because it almost like, it doesn't totally go like down your whole life, but if you are thinking ahead financially and planning, you probably will not have some of the major expenses. If you do have a family, if you do have a home, if you follow good principles, you probably won't have a mortgage. You probably won't have your kids at home. And so in my case with 4 kids, I can't imagine we'll have the same expenses that we have now. I'm just like, how could we? Like, we're going to, so therefore, like, it would have been really helpful. Yeah. These last like 10, 15 years. And we've had generous parents that have helped us in different ways. And so that's been a blessing. But I like this idea because I just think, man, wouldn't it be great if you could get like a lump sum to start your life, and then it ramps you up to living and then use for your future. And so that's intriguing. I think you have to be careful to know your kids well and to know how they might use it, and will they actually learn through some hardship, maybe to have to get through some stuff and get some good habits going. So that's the only maybe tricky part of all this. But I love the idea of it helping maybe even just like pay for things like paying off college, or help more tangible for the current stage of life, even perhaps could be like really great, because then it's like you get to see them use it. You get to see your kids use the money. And I think generally I like the concept of gifting like money to my kids like throughout their whole life when I'm still like very alive, and get to do it with them, do trips with them, take them on trips, help them with whatever comes up, just so that I can see it in action rather than it just being like quiet and kept away. And then suddenly you die and there's all this money. Those almost to me are some of the saddest stories of just, you hear, yeah, that teacher retired and then lived on a farm and they had $13 million. They left it to the local library. It's no one knew anything. And it's like amazing. And then it's also just like, why did they have so much in the end? Like, what kind of, I guess that helped the library, but like they could have done that with people. They could have experienced it. They could have seen it more in action, because you said, Kay, like money's traded for other things. Like it's no good unless it's traded for other things. And so if we agree with that, then it's hard to think about dying. Like when people say on their deathbed, like they don't usually say, I wish I would have worked more. Usually it's always a time thing. It's always, I wish I had more time with everyone I love and all those kinds of things. So yeah, how can we either buy more time, or how can knowing that we always easily just buy time? We can try, but maybe make the best use of the time that you have.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask you both the follow-up question to that, though. The farmer who saves a lot of money or whatever it is. I feel a little bit like, only now, maybe in this stage of life, that I've had some friends that have come into some money, right? And some of it's very punctuated cash outs on company buyouts and all these other things. And not in a way that they are trying to live so much better or change where they are, but it's like the sudden increase in their wealth has led to a much bigger house, a different style of vacation, different travel habits, some of these things. I'm trying to keep it anonymous here, but in some cases, one of the problems that they have told me about is that they have lost friends because, they see them living this certain way. And it's not necessarily they know their finances in and out, but it's, oh gosh, skiing the Alps. Here's an example. Skiing the Alps in the morning and then visiting the pyramids in the afternoon because you have a private jet now. And some people maybe they're just trying to milk everything out of life. Maybe they don't have to Instagram about it either, but it's the other ways. I think we're a conservative society and we don't want necessarily like people showing off wealth or I don't know, like I'm asking you, is that it? Or is it the fact that we don't have it? Or is it the fact that, they're able to have these life experiences when I feel like I'm just getting by? And like, what are the risks of that? And I bring it up because in one case, a friend of mine said that they lost some very close friends, like their kids were friends and stuff like this. But by moving to the other side of the world, which is just a few miles away, where the mansions are and all this other stuff, just became like a rift between them that could never be healed, which is funny because it's simply dollar signs. So
I question like what the emotional intimacy and depth of relationship is in some of these relationships. I'm not speaking about any of these specific examples or whatever, but I've noticed that as I've gotten older, when we were very young, all of my friends and I tended to make basically the same amount. But now that we're in our mid-30s, there are some that earn a lot, some that earn very little. And then obviously bulk of us are somewhere in the middle there. But I do find that friendships where both people
you're talking about like me and Bjorn, right? Because he works in a big corporate office and I am like
exactly.
Yeah. Just to clarify.
And so I hope that Bjorn treats you to some fancy vacations.
We're like,
you're taking the private jet up today, right? You're taking my private jet up.
The American Eagle.
But I find that when we're able to, whichever direction it's in, be like honest about the differences of where life is at now, and then treat each other to things according. Like I noticed that with a few friendships where some of those folks are earning way more now, they'll often just pay for dinner when we go out. I'll pay for coffee when I'm here in India, where my earning power is 10 times what my friends. I earn probably 10 times per hour what many of my friends here do. I pay for dinner. I just think that that's, to me, a way of just, we're not going to pretend like nobody's asking their friends to write them checks and if they are, that's a different problem. But I think also sometimes what I just witness from more of a distance is like when nobody wants to really acknowledge it and acknowledge how stuff has changed and then change the dynamic a little bit accordingly to make sure everybody feels loved and cared for and not left behind in the dynamic. I don't know. To me, that level of like kind of vulnerability goes a long way and in keeping stuff going despite wealth gaps.
It's that age-old concept of you do become like who you hang out with. And so this is like the opposite side of it in some ways. If you make a lot more than your friends, like you might feel strange doing some of those things. If they're like you said, Kate, if they're like true, like great friendships that go deep, like you might actually consider that when you're making decisions which is an interesting behavioral study a little bit, because part of me says if you make more, like all the more to you to go and invest that in some amazing experiences. Like that's really neat to be able to go do that. But especially when it's really different than what other people do. If you're taking multiple tropical vacations every year and like everyone else around you can do it every couple years, like that it can really stand out. I think that you can choose how you talk about it and how you share about it. And I also loved what you said about being generous with your friends, with your family. And that's a great way of giving back, and not like with no strings attached. Like, it's just because you love the people in your life, you can do it, you want to do it. And I think as long as it can stay at that, I guess, good level of it all, then I think it can be really great, as long as it doesn't come off, oh, you don't think we can pay our fair share or whatever. And so it's always a tricky thing to try to figure out. But yeah, I like what you said about trying to have a conversation about it. I think that it's hard. It can be awkward. You probably have to work up to it. But having some really close people in your life that you talk to about some of these things and get it out in the open, just so that there's not a bunch of assumptions being made, and not trying to kind of live that Facebook lifestyle where we only post all the cool things that happen in life. And I don't know. But it's a very, because there's like the good side of comparison where it can keep you in check and that. And then there's the bad side, right? If you're always like comparing yourself to everyone that has more, then it can lead you down other paths too. So it's very fascinating.
I was thinking, should we pass a law? It's like the use it or lose it phenomenon of like employee benefits, like your FSA, right? I think now you can roll over some money, but it used to be that if you didn't spend your FSA money, right, you lost it. Or what about like your PTO days, right? If you can't roll over PTO days, what does everyone do? They generally try to make sure they use all their PTO days. What about a law that says when you die, no matter what you have, is collected as taxes? Would that change people's mind about spending money earlier or dying with zero? You can't leave it to anyone. You can't will it to anyone. It's just because, like you said, Kate, it's all it is an accounting method, whether it's Bitcoin or any of these things that we use to equate to money is nothing other than how we bookkeep how much resource I owe you and you owe me. And so it really doesn't exist. You're passing on just the bookkeeping, the accounting to your kids potentially, but would that change people's minds? Use it or lose it?
I'm sure it would.
And get the Apple CarPlay next time. And yeah. So the question is, after reading the book or hearing about the book and the concept, did it change your mind on things? Or maybe not die with zero, but did you get absorbed into that mindset, or just do you change it? Did it move you down the field a little bit into some different thinking? What were your kind of overall thoughts on the effects of the book on you?
Yeah, I think that it gets me to think more about now, and just like the energy, time, and like season of life, and just to be freed to, I don't think like willy-nilly just spend money just because like I can, but really more think about what could we really invest in that would be really meaningful at this season of life, and just try to right size your season of life to the types of things that you might want to, whatever that is, energy or kids or whatever. You're living in India, maybe you can do some cool things there because you just happen to be there. Just thinking about it more in those terms. I still don't think it totally changes my mind for saving for the future because of just the unknowns of the future. Like health, I don't know if I'll always have the same job. I don't know if, there's lots of unknowns that are still worthy to save for. And I also am confident that I can invest that future money if I end up having more than I need. I know personally that I will be able to invest that in good things too. So like I'll invest that in future kids' expenses and future church opportunities or future organizations I want to give to or different things. And I don't have to always, it's not going to, if I practice many decades of living a certain lifestyle, I don't predict that just because I have a bunch more money, I'm going to just dramatically change my lifestyle. I think it'll just probably stay close to the same. Maybe I'll do a few extra things, but then I'll have extra to then deploy to other causes. So if I can, but it does help my mindset to remember that the end goal is not to have the most zeros. The end goal is to use it wisely throughout my whole life. That is both here and now and also into the future. And that takes conversation, like you said, Kate, like that takes thought. Like you have to actually plan for the here and later. And most people don't do that. Most people don't ever think about they just react to their life, and whatever happens financially happens. And nope, that is not a good strategy. So that was the big takeaway I had.
I think for me, it was because I've always been somebody that lived my life way more from that side than the more traditional side. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway was actually the more like dollars and cents side of it. And it's not that I actually think the goal is like dying with literally zero, but just reframing my mind. Let's say my retirement target was, I don't know, $5 million based off of a 4% rule, right? But then but following that rule and following the fact that typically market goes up 8 to 10%, that means I would be dying with more money to my name than I had ever had throughout I would be dying with my highest net worth. And it just clicked in my head that, wait, I don't need that to be the case. I'm not saying I want to be impoverished on my deathbed, or that if I have children or nieces or nephews or whoever, wouldn't want to be able to leave them really nice nest eggs to get their lives started or whatever. But okay, wait, like maybe what's wrong with dying with $2 million instead of $8 million or whatever. These are just made up numbers, but it just really reframed if I follow the kind of traditional financial planning model, like actually I would be dying with the most money I'd ever had to my name. And that just clicked and like, no, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I like getting together with you guys and other people who are thinkers, because it's like going through this book, I just had so many thoughts from the unethical money hacks. It's like, Kate, let's say you and I were married, and we said, instead of getting married, we'll just stay single, but we'll live together, and we'll put all the money that we ever earn in your name, and I'll just rack up a ton of debt. And then when I die with $2 million in debt, we'll have a lot of those memory experiences and life experiences, but then you'll just be forgiven. I think about, because when he was talking about how those memories are really compound interest, because you have the experience and then you have the memory that lasts forever. And so those memories are so much more important the earlier you have them and the more punctuated you have them and the more extreme you have them, because they will pay dividends, especially when you're not traveling. And so it's, in some ways I was like, oh geez, I need to start having some of these memories now. And I was thinking, like, get $1 million line of credit, start doing some of the stuff, and just start whatever, I don't know, base jumping or whatever I haven't done, or dishes. That's something I've never done. So it's just, there's just a million things. I think it gets your mind going on a lot of things. I think the nice thing about this book is it also kind of makes you think about your mortality. I think as you get older, you start thinking about it, right? You're in teens, you're invincible. You kind of think about that maybe when you have kids, but it's my parents and our parents' generation, they think about that, right? And I think you have to think about that and the dying with zero together, because the die is the health issue. The zero is the money issue, and they have to intersect, right? That's the whole point, is that strategically you want them to intersect, but it also means it's not just you have to have some hard realities about the money you have and what you can do with it, where you are realistically. And he has some calculators and stuff on like how long you're going to live. And I'm sure nobody eagerly goes and searches those out and puts your health in there. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die pretty soon. But it's just, I think it was a good book, because even if you're not rich, which I would not consider myself rich and having the problems that he has, but I think it's a good book for being a little realistic about who you are, where you are, what your health is, your future, because in some ways, many of the financial books I read or the life books I read tend to be a little overly optimistic, tend to be a little rosy, and make you think, yeah, everything's possible, and I'm on my deathbed, but my best years are ahead of me. And so this was, I just like that it's a little practical. It's kind of like one of those rom-coms that ends with the person who's talking to the person, they don't get together. It's just, so I really loved it. Like I said, I was looking at my other book, and I called it Die Broke. Just spend your money, do what you want with it. It's your money. In some cases, I don't even think kids should count on inheritance if they get it, but that's your money, right? I get parents feel different obligations to their kids, but I think in 99% of the cases where so many people are just scrambling and hoping and trying to get into retirement, that the idea of surplus or helping someone else out isn't necessarily a practical thing. But I like, for the people that are struggling with this, different way of thinking about it, not hoarding it, those kinds of things. Any other final thoughts?
No, good way to poke at the tried and true methods of thinking. And the only thing I was going to say, I guess, is that it does sound a little bit like the equity optimization stuff for paying off your mortgage more quickly. It's written to that same audience. Like, this is assuming that you have options, you've saved, you can choose to do things. It's not written to a struggling audience, which is like most of America. So it's unique in that sense. But I do think that the takeaway of it, of investing your money in the things that have the highest value to you and your family or whoever else you care about in your financial household, that's something that everybody, I think, can have a takeaway on. Because even if you're struggling, like, you still can choose some things. And yeah, it's a good concept to live by.
Yeah. Good recommendation, Kate. I enjoyed it. Thanks for bringing that to the force.
So glad.
Got any other books that you want to check off the list? Anything else that's interesting you these days, either of you?
The one that I'm considering, at least, I guess we can explore it, it's called The Future Self or Your Future Self by Hal Hershfield, who is the behavioral economist that's studying this. He's the guy that like had the AI tool or the computer tool, or like people would sit down and they would see themselves like in the future, like a 68-year-old version of yourself, and they would have you make decisions after that. And it's related to what we're doing here. I'm just really intrigued by this concept. I feel like it's really hard for us to connect with our future self, and yet like of so many things we do now impact that future you. So it just has got me thinking a lot about, this has been researched for a while, but it's not mainstream behavioral economics. And just how can we bridge that gap? That feels like it fits right in our space. And I think one of the ways is just like tiny behaviors, doing them consistently over time. Like that is one way to do it. But why is it so hard for us to connect with our future self? And might there even be a way to predict someday what your future self would be most likely to be like? Because people say you're like people you hang out with, you're like your parents, there's got to be some data out there that you could put together, and like you're 78% likely to be like this kind of person. It's a little bit of your parents, a little bit of your community, a little bit of your spouse or whatever. And then what would that mean for, and if then that type of person has tendencies one way or the other, might you want to adjust things now for the future self? I don't know. So I've been digging in a little bit.
I'm down to read it. Yeah, I'm curious. There's something I was listening to a podcast episode with the CEO of 23andMe, the genetic testing, the DNA testing company. And she was just talking about, I just don't understand why people don't want to, what kind of diseases they're prone to, or like the health history, or like lifestyle habits now that could pay dividends for them in the future because of the type of blood they have or whatever, and all these things. And then I just saw, did you just see the news that 23andMe is bankrupt? So they wasn't broke. And I was thinking, saw that, and I was thinking, I wonder if people don't want to know the future in some ways, right? They avoid it because you almost want to think like that the libertarianism side of the future isn't written. I can make it whatever I want, or am I predestined for stuff? I just kind of wonder if sometimes that scares people. In some ways, I can see absolutely the value of it, especially if you could like fast forward and be like, listen, Peter, this is what you should do. Here's your best optimal strategy for being happy, making money, and living life, and all these things. And I'd be like, oh man, I'd love that. And then on the other hand, I can see myself not necessarily loving that either. So I'm totally down for seeing that.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Thanks for that.
I put health site out there to take a look at. I'm just starting to dig in a little bit more, and also the name of my private jet.
I love it. As long as I get a ride on it, Bjorn. That's all I care about.
Yeah, sure. Maybe as long as I get to come visit you in India, then we'll be good.
Hey, we'll take the jet to India.
I got to come pick you up. Yeah. Oh, I won't be flying. I'll be just enjoying it. Awesome. Yeah, I would be intrigued in reading this. This is one that I'm kind of, I don't know. It just is, there's research out there. There's been a lot of stuff happening, but it feels like it's early on in the sense of like where plan design was at, and now plan design is mainstream. Like so many companies have auto enrollment and auto escalation and all this kind of stuff, and it's actually working. And that's what they were saying 15 years ago, but it took 15 years for companies to actually believe it. So this feels like it could be the same kind of thing.
Have you seen the video, Bjorn? And this one might hit me a little bit, but I'm sure you can go on YouTube and there's many people doing it. But there's some app that will age your face. And what it does is it'll kind of go through years, but it won't show you like the year. But what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take your child and you, and it's called like the age where your child starts to worry about you dying. And it just ages the parent, and it films it, and the kid, and for a while, the kid is not worried. They find it funny. They're laughing. And then there's a part where in this video, watch the girl starts getting really sad, like the toddler, when she's like getting really sad. And then when you look at, when it stops it, because it sees that she's getting anguish, and it's 57. It's not anywhere near as old as you think it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like it's,
yeah.
But that's great. And Kate, any other book ideas that you want? Let's throw them on the calendar. I like this. It helps me stay informed instead of having stuff on my to-do list forever that never gets done. It's kind of like coaching. Helps me stay accountable.
Yep.
I can't think of a book off the top of my head, but I'll think of it and I'll pick our next one.
Love it.